And now what I'd like to do is introduce Sandra Kurtzig, who's CEO and Chairman of Kenandy, and she's going to speak next.
Well, thank you very much, George. It's a pleasure to do this webinar with George and with Rob. So thank you for joining us today. And we're just sort of amazed by how many people have signed up. We don't do very many of these webinars, but there are, I think, close to 150 people on the webinar today. So thank you all for coming and hearing what we have to say. I think George did such a fabulous summary of what he is seeing in the industry and why companies are gravitating to more digital enterprise. I'm going to talk a little bit about who Kenandy is for those who don't know, and really the evolution and implication for ERP today. And then specifically talks are about the order to cash, which is what we're seeing. Order to cash is the business. If you can't get an order in and you can't get paid, you really don't have a business, and everything obviously falls out when you think about an ERP out of that. So I was going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing, how companies are sort of moving to the next step and merging the future with the past being legacy, and the future and current being more of the cloud-based systems. And then Rob is going to talk about, I'll talk a little about a couple case history studies, a small, a medium, and a large company. And then Rob is going to talk about specifically Scott Fetzer, which is a division of Berkshire Hathaway. So there he gets both the small and the medium and the large company. Kenandy is an ERP platform. And I hate to even use the word ERP because I think it's sort of such an old term, but for lack of changing the term, because it's obviously you can't change a term in an industry very easily, we're still using it. But I think ERP is morphing into how do you get a system that's more agile and can be implemented quickly and can respond to the business. And what Kenandy does is we basically do the order to cash, procure to pay, planning, production, global financials, and all or some of that depending on your company and how you want to strategically implement us. We're built on the Salesforce platform, so we inherit all the security and the flows of Salesforce. We don't have to put our own systems together because they are obviously putting systems all over the world right now. And our system allows you to interface with some of your old legacy systems, some of the newer systems, applets that might be on the Salesforce app exchange. So that, next please. I think this is amazing statistic to me. It brings it all home. It actually ties into what George was saying as well, is in the last 10 years, 70% of the Fortune 1000 companies have vanished. They just weren't able to adapt to change because things are happening so quickly, and not just in technology, but just in the way people are doing business. And by the year 2020, 50% of the workforce are going to be millennials. So your children might be your bosses, and unless you're a millennial now, and then hopefully you'll still be around then. But the whole world is changing. The millennials expect to have systems that are as easy to use as what they just used on Amazon, and even Amazon's getting a little dated. And they're also the Internet of Things. By 2020, there's going to be 70 billion Internet things that are going to be connected to the Internet. So the whole world is really getting closer and changing, and of course globalization, where you can use a device, any device, anywhere in the world, whenever you want it, really changes the way people can think of their business model. Next, please. And if I look at, what was it like in the olden days? In the olden days, you built a piece of equipment, whatever your product was, your customer bought your product, you shipped the product, you got paid for it. That's totally changing. I think George hit on this point a bit, that with so much acquisition, companies are not just selling products. Please, next slide. Next. They're now selling, the product is becoming a service. So they're selling a product, they're selling software with the product, they're selling services, they're selling projects. If you're in medical systems, you're probably selling a whole series of medical devices because you most likely acquired a lot of companies, and you're selling these to hospitals. You're probably selling products from third-party vendors, and you're wrapping services around this. In fact, you're not just selling your product. You're in a lot of cases, you are renting your product. You're charging your customer by image, or you're charging them a rental. everything is wrapped into a whole series of solution components. And in a lot of cases, especially with the very acquisitive larger companies, the customer has to go to different divisions of your company to buy products, to third parties. They have to sort of put this all together, or they have to, go to these different places. And as George said, you want to have consolidated billing. So go to the next slide. I think what the customers are looking for today is, in some ways, you might think of it as an architecture layer that's riding above your legacy systems, because the most important thing is to get the orders in and get the cash in at the other end, get the invoices out and get the cash in. So the idea of focusing on the most important application within the company, which does entail everything in a way, but it's to let the customer have one view, starting with an e-commerce application, to have one view to your company, to have all the products you're selling available and online so that the customer can see this information and track it, and to have a single coordinated order and fulfillment. So, and to keep, there's no real reason in some ways to replace all of your systems unless they're old. You can start with replacing this layer, which is order to cash layer, and then as you go forward, you can start replacing some of your old dated, systems underneath it. But this is sort of a consolidation layer. You might think you could go in, and it does all of the work of the order to cash. Why don't you go to the next layer, next slide? I think I did a summary slide here. Yeah, so if you think about just flipping upside down all of the things you think that goes into an ERP, and you look at it in terms of order to cash as your business. Under your customer order, you're going to have your credit, your configuration, your contract management, your trade promotion, your e-commerce, your pricing, your discounts. Some of that can be kept in your legacy system. Some of it is brought to the front end for your order processing. Then you have your order fulfillment, and you might do contract manufacturing. You might drop ship. You obviously have an available to promise issue. You want to see whether you can fulfill this customer order. You have your bill of materials, your procurement, and you can go as deep into your legacy environment as you want, or just pull the information up to your orchestration layer here. You ship your order, pick, pack, and ship. You have to have services scheduled, third-party fulfillments. You have tracking these orders. And then, of course, the most important part is to invoice quickly your customer with a very, very fast turnaround. And depending on the size of your company, some of our customers have the whole order-to-cash process automated from the EDI level all the way to the shipping level, and they just have one button. That's it. Everything gets processed. Well, they don't have a button because it comes in through EDI, and everything gets processed automatically. And obviously, in some of the smaller companies, they may have a more manual operation, but this is the kind of thing that we're seeing in the environment today. And let me talk a little bit about some of these customers. Do you want to go to the next slide? So the SaaS model, the software as a service, in some way democratizes the world because it allows small companies, medium-sized companies, and large companies to have the same services, be able to have the same software, and depending on obviously, how large or small they are and how complex they are, they will use more or less of the features, and in some cases, of course, be able to customize features that they want because we're built in a managed package environment. You can write software around our particular objects. Big Heart Pet, one of our larger companies, has a very interesting history in that they started off being a $5 billion Del Monte Foods corporation. They had both consumer foods and pets products. They acquired a large pet product company in LA. NBI, that was up and running for a couple of years now, and then they spun off their consumer products, and we implemented their whole corporation, including their 5 manufacturing plants, warehouses, and co-packers, and they consolidated from 110, I believe, different legacy applications they had running. I mean, Del Monte is a 140-year-old company, and they consolidated down to 10 applications, Kenandy and a couple other Salesforce platform applications, and they developed some applications themselves internally. Their sales order process is totally automated from the time it comes in from EDI out to all the MRP functionality and shipped out. They have a very high sales order, supplier, work order volume. They have hundreds of thousands of EDI messages and millions of accounting entry lines. And so it's a very high volume, large corporation, total wall-to-wall Kenandy. And Dave McLean, the CIO, great guy, was supposed to be on the call today, but they just got acquired. Del Monte just got acquired by J.M. Smucker yesterday. So congratulations for the acquisition. We look forward to talking to Smucker now. And so there's a large company implementation. Moving on to a small company that has been a wonderful, fun company for us to work with. It's Merrow Sewing Machine Company, located in Massachusetts, and they run 98% of their business on Kenandy. And as the CEO, Charlie Merrow, said, no sticky notes. You have 70% more productive today than they were, 2-3 years ago when they started this, when they first implemented Kenandy. They're over 100-year-old company that's the largest and I think one of the only industrial sewing machine companies in the world. They sell around the world, and they have been able to, without programmers, add features and functions and to the system very quickly. They configure as their own processes like repairs without any IT staff.